Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the MPO Board. Today is Wednesday, January 10th. Before we begin, I have two items to read into the record. The first is a memorandum from Commissioner Les Miller. Please be advised that I am not feeling well and therefore unable to attend the MPO meeting. Please read the record for my absence into the records. And also a memorandum from Commissioner Sandy Merman. Please be advised that I will be late in arriving to the MPO meeting today due to another appointment, and she apologizes for the inconvenience. We don't have a quorum yet, but I think we are only one short. We just did get one. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Before we begin, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And this morning, in lieu of a formal invocation, we're just going to have a moment of silence to begin the meeting. All right. Our first item on the agenda this morning is public comment. At this time, I have one person who has signed up for public comment, and that is Sam Gibbons. We have 3 minutes per speaker.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you all for sitting on this board and everything you're doing to try and improve our region in this county and our city. I'd like to talk to you about this BRT proposal that's being it's predicated on TBX being built. That's $6 billion we're looking to build on Lexus lanes. And it's not going to help solve our regional problems of transportation. It's also, this $8 billion proposal is looking at, or you're being told that it's going to help generate revenue for transportation. Now, the Veterans Expressway in 2016 produced $40 million in transportation revenue from those toll lanes. Now, if you double that, which is not the increased capacity that you're never going to see $80 million in revenue from this TBX Lexus lanes, but that is 1/100th of the infrastructure money that is being recouped from putting into that we're going to. $80 million is double the amount the Veterans Expressway produced in 2016 in revenue, and that is 1/100th of the $8 billion it's going to take to build these things. Now, I'd also like to talk about, I think it's a great idea that this section, especially USF to downtown, is incredibly important. We definitely do need to build regional options, and we need transportation options. But that section of particular interstate, the community now is talking about taking down. And you're talking about also rebuilding infrastructure that has just been built. I mean, that concrete out there just finished drying about a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and we're looking at tearing it back up again. And if these plans go ahead and go through and we do build these Lexus lanes, it's going to look like an incredible waste of money when the communities finally do organize and we take 275 down north of Malfunction Junction. Josh Frank's proposal creating a linear interstate between I-4 and 275 is greatly going to increase the chances of 275 working as a functioning interstate. And his proposal is predicated on the fact that we're going to have real regional transportation. And that's what I urge this MPO to look at. Because I think although BRT is a wonderful, cheap way to move people around, and it will work in certain areas, it's not what this region needs, and it's not looking forward to where we're going where we can go as a region. Again, thank you all for your time, and hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who is participating in public comment this morning? Seeing no one, we are going to move on to committee reports and online comments. Gina Torres, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. So last month, most of your committees held their annual elections of officers. The CAC re-elected David Wilson as chair, Bill Roberts as vice chair, and elected Rick Fernandez as officer at large. For the Livable Roadways committees, David Hay will continue as vice chair, and Kathy Coyle will serve as officer at large. The Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board re-elected Gloria Mills as vice chair and Dr. Fred Barja as member at large, and the TAC will be holding their elections this month. The Transportation Disadvantage Legislative Awareness Day will be held February 14th in Tallahassee. The TDCB's annual legislative message is included in your packet under the consent agenda. Committees were also briefed on requirements of the Sunshine and Public Records Law from our attorney, Cameron. The Hillsborough County Public Works Director, John Lyons, gave an update to the CAC and the TAC on the county's 10-year transportation plan. CAC members were asking about support for transit and how it relates to development entitlements. The City of Tampa provided an overview of smart traffic signals and the city's plans for updating their traffic system with new signal timing plans for all 535 intersections that it controls. The Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority presented on their connected vehicle pilot, and the school transportation update and school safety study was also presented. That's it for your committee reports. I do have the online comments, though. We had one Facebook comment from Amanda Brown. She's hoping that in 2018, the MPO board will push for increased spending on transit, adding that transit, bicycling, and walking safety measures should be our #1 priority. She suggested looking at placing a fee on Uber and Lyft as a way, like in Chicago, to help fund transit. And she urged the MPO board members to become more active in the Tampa Bay Next process to get a better sense of what DOT is communicating to the public. And she wished you all a Happy New Year. And we have for emails, 6 emails from Dale Tyndall expressing his concerns about Howard Franklin congestion and the 275 interchanges. We had an email from Robert Sawalish. He's concerned about the intersection of Bruce B. Downs and the VA hospital entrance, and thinks that signals and turn lanes and crosswalks are things that are needed. I think we forwarded this to Hillsborough County Public Works. And then we had 3 emails from Jose Menendez, who on December 17th, I need the glasses. December 17th, he was writing us that he kind of tracks our bicycle and pedestrian crash fatalities. And he was reporting that 3 additional pedestrians had died. Charles Miller was 69. He was crossing US 41 in Lutz. Christopher Scagliano, 44. He was directing traffic in a memorial, actually, for Larry Miller, which is a deputy that I had worked with on the community traffic safety team. That was horrible. And then Jamie Jones was also hit and killed crossing US 301 in Pinota-Sassa. So a few weeks after that, Jose wrote us back on December 15th to report that Wayne Kirsch, 52, was on Hillsborough Avenue riding his bike and was killed, hit from behind. And he was the 12th county cyclist. Those other pedestrians, that was the 50th pedestrian that died that year. And then more recently, actually just a couple days ago, he reported about Moses Carter, who died on East Hillsborough Avenue. He was a 73-year-old. So I wanted to report that in March we'll be coming back. Thank you, Commissioner Kemp, for your suggestion about reporting on these types of crashes and getting a little bit more information. So we'll be doing that quarterly. We're going to start that in March. So those were the online comments and the committee reports. Thanks.
Commissioner Kemp.
I just have one. I'd just like to point this out that I just read yesterday that Vision Zero in New York, which they've implemented for a number of years, they're one of the only places in the nation where pedestrian deaths are dropping off at a big rate. And so I don't know, maybe we can start to kind of look where this is being successful, and they attribute it to more careful road design and what they were doing to improve the situation. So I just thought that was worth noting.
Yes, I'm following that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have 3 items on our consent agenda this morning. We can handle them all with one motion. They are the approval of minutes of December 5th, committee appointments, and ratification of the legislative message for Transportation Disadvantage Day.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for, and the second was Commissioner Kemp, for approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. We have 4 status reports this morning. The first is the St. Petersburg Central Avenue BRT project. Good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to be here in Hillsborough County.
My name is Cassandra Borchers. I'm the Chief Development Officer at the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing across the pond on the Central Avenue BRT. We're quite proud of this project, and it will be our first major capital investment in transit for the agency. We've been working on this project for quite a long time in terms of this project is looked at. A number of executive directors have taken a shot at whether or not we could do bus rapid transit in the Central Avenue corridor. And it's been included in the MPO's long-range transportation plan for a number of update cycles. We are currently in the project development process with the federal government, and I'll get into the funding strategies that we've used for this project a little bit later. But most importantly, this is a project that is broadly supported by our community because it really focuses on developing the urban core of St. Petersburg. Again, we are very proud of this project and also very grateful to the Department of Transportation for helping us get through the project development process with a grant for $500,000, which we matched for the work that we're doing right now. This project has been part of the regional plan, and for those of you that are working with the TMA right now, you'll recognize this as what we like to call Project Zero, meaning they're coming up with the top 5 projects to move forward as a catalyst for the region, but we see this as really the first. The reason that it's not discussed at the TMA is because we're so far along with the funding process and the partnerships that we have that it's beyond just planning, it's about building a project. This project would connect one of our major employment hubs, downtown St. Petersburg. And if you've been to downtown St. Petersburg lately, it's a lot of fun. So I really do recommend you spend an evening in downtown St. Petersburg. And maybe you'll take the Central Avenue trolley, which goes down to St. Pete Beach. Again, a great place for people to go. But what it doesn't do is get you there very fast. So right now it takes about 70 minutes to get from downtown all the way down to Paso Grill on the Central Avenue trolley. But when we start to connect this at a faster speed, we'll be able to attract all kinds of new events to our area where people can come to festivals and activities in downtown St. Pete, but the hotel rooms on the beach could be used. So we're not just saying, come see St. Petersburg and the downtown, we're saying, come to the beach, go to the event. We'll have 17 stations along this route. It'll cut the time in half to a 35-minute trip. And we're working on making this different than all of our other services. So we will have different vehicles, new technologies in the corridor, and we're working with the city hand in hand on how to make this work along the First Avenue. So if you've been to St. Petersburg, you'll know that Central Avenue is a lovely place. It's a great place to walk and bike and shop. But if you're trying to get from one end of the county to the other, you're going to take the First Avenues. First Avenue North goes west, First Avenue South comes east. There are 3 things that will make this service different. The first is the stations. So we are going to have larger stations with more amenities, much like what you see for the Metro Rapid, but you also have other cities that have done different kinds of stations with wheelchair access, other panels and seating options, but this looks and feels different than your regular bus shelter.
Can I just ask you a
Yes.
question? What is the level of shielding from the climate in the station? Is it covered? Are there any fans? Is there any air conditioning or anything like that?
There would not be air conditioning. We have not done the detail work on the design of each of the stations, and we're working with each of the cities along the route. There are 3 cities along the route, and they can choose different kinds of stations if they'd like.
Do you see them being covered, though?
Absolutely, yes.
And how long, I'm sure you'll probably get to this, but how long is a person going to be waiting in the station generally?
The service would operate every 15 minutes, so no more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, yeah.
Sorry. The platform level, how high will that be?
We're doing it at level boarding.
Okay,
So
so
that
you don't
would
have to
be
walk
at
up
curb.
any steps.
There won't be any steps on the vehicle. And the next thing that really does make this different and more fundamentally different is the vehicle itself. We would do low floor boarding, 60-foot articulated vehicles. Again, when you see these vehicles, you will know that they are different to the regular service that we're providing. They will have a unique branding, and we're working with the city of St. Petersburg and the other cities along the route to determine what that branding looks like.
One more follow-on. Will this be trackable on an app on your iPhone somehow?
We are in partnership with a company called Transit App. So right now, you know exactly the real-time system. PSTA has a very robust real-time system that we use through our automated vehicle locator system called Clever Devices. If you go right now on Transit App, and please download it today because we're tracking how many new downloads we get. You can also use this to catch any HART bus as well. But what it does is you can put in your origin, your destination, and it will tell you which buses you will need to take, what your wait time is in between them, if you have to walk in between them, how long that will take you. It would also give you the time that it would take Uber or the time it would take to bike there. So that is not part of this project, but can certainly talk more about Transit App.
Is there Wi-Fi on the bus?
Yes, and there has been for a number of years.
Yeah. Yes.
What's
Mr.
the
Buchanan.
capacity of the bus?
That's a very good question, and we're working with the city of St. Petersburg on how many seats they want to take out because they want to put bikes on the bus instead of in front of the bus. And so if we do not have bikes on the bus, we could have a capacity up to about 60 people seated plus standees. If we have bikes on the bus, that diminishes the number of seats we can have, so it would probably be closer to 40. The last thing that makes this project different, and probably the most significant to making sure that people who are not taking the bus understand that we have made a big investment in a fixed guideway transit, is what we're calling the BAT lane, which is a business access and transit lane. When we look at the First Avenue North and First Avenue South, these are 3-lane sections of roadway going in one direction, and they move pretty fast. There's enough capacity on these roadways to take the third travel lane, which is sometimes used as a left-hand turn lane, and convert it to a transit lane. There will be turns permitted in this lane, so there'll be no changes to the businesses that back up to First Avenue North and First Avenue South, but it will allow us to move faster through the corridor. This is what it looks like in other cities. In this case, it is an investment in the colorization of the lane, but it indicates that that lane is special and that lane is supposed to be used for transit. Again, turns will be permitted, and so we do not have an issue with traffic impacts because those turns will be maintained. You'll see at the bottom of the slide there is a cross-section of what we're anticipating. In some sections of the corridor, we would have to remove the bike lanes from the First Avenues to Central Avenue, but within the corridor itself, we'll maintain all modes of transportation. We started the formal part of this project in the spring of 2016, and just before Hurricane Irma hit, we submitted our small starts evaluation. It was literally moments before Heather left to go secure her house. She pushed the button, and there the application was to the Federal Transit Administration. We have gotten some really good feedback from the FTA about the quality of this project, and most of all, the funding plan itself. We'll move forward with design soon. Try to finish that up by the end of the year. Again, I'd like to thank the Department of Transportation for helping us with the design, which they're also giving us some funding to support. We would eventually get to the opening of the service, which we're hoping the end of 2020. there are still some things to do and some very important steps that we need to take, not just on the technical side with our engineering, but getting into the president's budget is going to be a big challenge. You may have seen the article in the newspaper about the funding challenges at the federal level. This project and the funding source that we're using with the Capital Investment Grant Program from the Federal Transit Administration is something that is a hot topic right now in DC. We're working hard, and we go up to DC quite often. You see our new chair, Commissioner Janet Long, with Brad and Commissioner Pat Gerard. They were up in Washington late last year talking to folks about the program itself and make sure that that program is maintained and that we clear the pipeline for new projects like the Central Avenue BRT. When we submit this project to the FTA, there are two ways that they rate your project. One is the project itself, and is your project justifiable? Is a project justification? And we're doing well, and we're hoping for a medium rating on this project just next month when the report on the Small Starts program comes out. What makes this project great is the funding plan and how we've put that together. By policy, the federal government can give you up to 80% of the capital needs for the project, but that rarely happens, and most agencies that apply to this program start at the 50% level. If you are at 50%, the Federal Transit Administration looks at your project favorably, and they consider the rest of the project funding to be considered local. So we have put together a program that uses the state New Starts funding option with 25%, a little over 25% coming from our local sources, a little over 25% coming from the state, and under 50% asking from the feds. The 25% for our truly local match is coming from three general sources. And we could not have done this project without our partners in the city of St. Petersburg, St. Pete Beach, and other private sources that we are working on. We have taken $5 million from our capital reserve and set it aside for this project. We also have a commitment from the city of St. Petersburg for up to $4 million, and we've been working with them very closely about the different funding sources that they will be using within their own city in order to make this project a reality. They have also committed to maintaining that red lane. So when I showed you those pictures of that red lane treatment, that is something that takes some funding to maintain and does need to be redone every 3 to 5 years, depending on the environment that it's working in. And the city is committed to doing that. And that is a very important part of the funding plan on the operations side. So a lot of times we talk about these projects, we're talking about the capital funding and let's just get it built. But you need to operate these projects. And while PSTA is ready to take on the additional cost of operating a 15-minute service from downtown to the beach, there are things that we cannot do because of the size of our current budget. So our budget and this project needs to be under 5% of our total budget in order for us to get a streamlined assessment of our funding plan. In order for us to do that, we needed the city to take on this additional responsibility for the maintenance of that lane. We know that this project will be successful. Not only it is the highest ridership corridor in the region because we have so many routes that use portions of this corridor, it is supportive of what the city and the county are trying to do in order for it to have a robust economy from not just the downtown, but to the beach, which is a major economic generator for us. It has always been part of a regional plan, and our local cooperation and the shared funding plan is going to make this project fabulous. So with that, I will take any additional questions about this project or anything else that PSTA is doing, including going to the airport. Start with
Okay, Commissioner Kemp and then Mr. Lopano.
I have a few questions. One is with the low boarding, is that necessarily electric buses?
No, it is not necessarily electric buses. At this point, we've priced out hybrid electrics. One of the features of hybrid electric buses is that in a downtown area where we have a lot of sidewalk cafes, we can put that bus on a depot mode, which means that it runs on electric power when it's in front of a cafe or at a recovery area.
That's interesting. But you haven't, that final decision hasn't been made yet, or?
No, we do have an electric bus program,
Right.
and we've purchased 2 electric buses, and we're working on the expansion of that fleet.
And the total cost of the project?
Is $42 million for the capital side.
The ridership that you have there now, because you have the Jolly Trolley running?
Jolly Trolley is in Clearwater. This is the Central
Oh, I'm
Avenue
sorry.
Trolley. We have the Route 18, the Route 52. We have a number of routes that come into that general corridor.
And so you're projecting, though, a ridership for this
About 4,500 a day.
4,500 day? Okay, thanks.
Mr. Lopano.
Yeah, what was the name of that website we're all supposed to download?
The Transit app.
The Transit app.
Very creative.
Everyone in the audience,
The Transit app.
Go there now. Thank you. It's a great project.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. Maybe you mentioned you haven't gotten to design yet, but as you've studied this corridor, do you anticipate a problem from the operations standpoint with regards to, well, people just sort of rushing that red lane and to use it as a continuous right turn lane?
Well, what's interesting is that the way that these lanes operate, let me see if I can get you a little picture of this. We're actually going to be left lane running.
Left lane, okay.
Which is very interesting and a unique feature across the country. Not many projects do left lane running.
Okay.
And the reason that we're doing left lane running is because of neighborhood impacts. So the central core, you have Central Avenue, and that's a business corridor. The First Avenues back up to Central Avenue and our business, so that First Avenue North has businesses on the south side and homes on the north side. In order for us to put these stations in, we don't want to put it in front of somebody's house, so we're going to create island stations. The city has agreed to take out some of the parking in order for us to accommodate transit signal priority, queue jumping, as well as get into the left lane and then into the transit lane. This will be a cooperative effort even in the operations, and the city of St. Petersburg will have to enforce that left lane, left turn permissions on the business and access transit lane.
Okay. And those with articulated buses, I assume those will be near side intersection stations or
They'll be
stops?
far side.
Far side. Okay.
Far side.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Will you be able to eliminate the other routes that are serving that same corridor? Or will you keep some of that service in place?
We will keep the majority of that service in place, at least to our Grand Central Station, which is located at 31st Street. We will look at the Central Avenue Trolley. Right now, that runs at a 20-minute frequency, and we would take that down to probably a 45-minute frequency on the local, and then leave the 15-minute frequency on the First Ave North and First Ave South.
So you're really providing a significant amount of additional capacity?
Yes.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I caught that in the presentation with the left-hand lane. And so when I think about, and I've seen the BAT lanes, the bus, the business access transit on the right hand. So when a person's on the right and your lane's on the right, they can just drive into the business or make that turn there. So what happens when you have the left-hand lane and you have permission for left-hand turns, but the car can't make the left-hand turn because of the traffic on the other way? Is that handled by the system?
These are one-way streets.
Oh, I see.
These are one-way streets. So this is the cross-section is a one-way cross-section. So you see all the cars are going in the same direction. So you have, on the left-hand side for a general cross-section, you would have parking, the transit lane, 2 travel lanes, a bike lane, and another parking lane. In places where we couldn't fit that in because we need a wider lane for the bus, we would take that bike lane and put it on Central Avenue. So that's part of the mitigation of staying within the existing right-of-way. The city of St. Petersburg, if you've been down there, it's very focused on pedestrian safety and has put out a number of areas where they have diminished the space that a pedestrian has to cross. This would do the same, because we would actually, at the intersections, people would come to, from the neighborhood, come to the transit station and have a shorter distance to walk. We are talking very closely with the University of South Florida at St. Pete and at our end of the line station. And in that particular location, we're actually looking at adding a protected bike lane closest to the curbside with the transit lane next to it. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting process to go through station by station, but pedestrian safety is one of our #1 concerns.
I just have one question. Has there been any public opposition to just the concept of going from 3 travel lanes to 2 travel lanes?
I would say that there has been a lot of questions and discussion, but we've looked at this at least in 3 different analyses, and the city has done its own independent analysis of the travel lane and the traffic impacts or lack thereof.
Sometimes it's counterintuitive, though, for people to recognize that doing some of these things, it actually will make traffic move more smoothly, not less, when you reduce the number of lanes. And I just wonder how successful you feel you've been in sort of selling that concept to people and having them understand it.
I think because we're protecting the turns into the businesses, that we haven't had any opposition, any strong opposition to doing this. There's always going to be a concern when you take this corridor from 3 through lanes to 2 through lanes. But again, those left-hand turns, and this is a very unusual corridor in that most of the time you're thinking about right-hand turns into businesses, and in this case, it's the left-hand turns that we really need to protect.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you very much. That was
Thank you.
very informative. We are going to move on now to the MPO Regional Coordination and Best Practices Research, and I believe Ray Charmonti is here for that.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to return to home roots of my past occasionally. Okay, great. I just wanted to update you on the status of this study that's going on. Remind you again, this is an FDOT-funded study to study better regional coordination and to look at opportunities for improving that. The study overview, this builds on the results, and some of you may have participated in the May 17th Collaborative Labs workshop over in St. Pete. We had about 180 people that participated in that to talk about what successful regional coordination means, to identify barriers locally to that execution, examine the feasibility of an MPO merger as part of it, develop viable options, and build consensus on a preferred regional coordination framework. We are just at the end of Phase 1 now. Phase 1 basically was to validate the project parameters, outlining our existing conditions in this area, and look at policy characterizations at the county and state levels. We're going into Phase 2, which is to identify relevant peer regions and MPOs and develop case studies. And then Phase 3 will be a symposium to build support for viable options and to just look at the results of Phase 1 and 2 and how to move forward. Going into a little bit more detail in the phases, this will summarize the key areas of interest from the May 7, 2017 workshop. Right now, there's been listening sessions with staff directors of the MPOs in the region and elected officials. Looking at how the individual MPOs identify projects and prioritize projects. It's different among the different MPOs. The structure of governance in the particular counties, which is very different. Funding sources and uses, benefits and drawbacks. One of the things that my present job gives me is the opportunity to see all the MPOs. I go to every MPO meeting in the region, and they're very different. They have different ways of doing things, prioritizing their structures, And that's something that obviously has to be looked at and understood in this process. Phase 2 is where we're beginning now. This is using, again, the results from the collaborative lab workshop and the research in Phase 1 to really compare the coordination effort and outcomes with peer regions to Tampa Bay and their MPO structures. So we want to highlight key findings and really outline several options for stronger regional coordination. And also, part of the study includes if you were to merge, for example, the 3 MPOs of Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough, how you would do that, what would the ideas be to how that could happen if the elected officials decided that. Phase 3, again, is a second collaborative workshop. That would be May 18, 2018. And we would present the results of 1 and 2. We would build consensus again as to future directions, follow up on recommendations using remote polling and the other things we did at the first workshop. And then a third workshop would follow at the end to really make decisions on how we move forward. Pending the results, we have a stakeholder committee that includes staff directors from the MPOs, FDOT, TBARTA representatives, would gather and have gathered to discuss revised structures, and will continue through this process up into December, when ultimately we would be making recommendations to the elected officials on the MPOs. I want to remind you that the final decision is of the board members of the MPOs and the governor, even though there's a lot of people involved in this process and having opinions, but that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and they are the people that make the decision on what form you want to have. We have, just to talk to you a little bit about the study management team, we have a non-voting project advisory group. Again, this includes the MPO staff directors, TBARTA, the Tampa Bay Partnership, the Urban Land Institute, again, to monitor the study and make sure that the right issues are being looked at and that we stay on the right track. This is the meeting schedule. Again, these meetings have all already been set up for the process, and we will continue to keep to this this timetable as best we can in the future. And again, what are we working on now? We're looking at statutes, federal and state, agencies and partners, regional coordination, and travel patterns. Demographics, our counties and our MPOs are very different type of demographics. Geopolitical boundaries, we have our political boundaries, but we also have geographic issues, one of them being the existence of the actual bay called Tampa Bay, which does affect the way people travel, and common issues and concerns. And that's kind of where we are at this point, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, are there any questions or comments from any board members? Yes, Beth.
Board members, I just wanted to draw your attention to a summary that we've provided in your agenda packet of your responses to the questionnaire that we talked about back in November. And briefly, a couple of the benefits that you all have identified that we might be able to realize out of a merger of the 3 MPOs, clearly speaking with one voice on regional transportation priorities, supporting the region's economic growth, and the potential for increasing grants, discretionary funds, and for negotiating multi-county public-private partnerships. So I think with those benefits in mind, that's kind of our marching orders for looking at what we'd like to be able to create out of this study. And then for mitigating some of the risks, you all pointed to opportunities for neighborhoods in the path of major transportation projects to negotiate for remedies, opportunities for small cities to participate in major transportation decisions, and the need for us to continue to coordinate thoroughly with our local governments in their transportation investment decisions and growth management decisions so that we're all working together. And so we have provided that feedback to the consulting team, and we're looking forward to hearing more about the project.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on now to Freight Logistics Zone follow-up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Hunter. I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation. I'm the District 7 Freight Coordinator. I'm going to give a brief overview of our freight program that we have ongoing at the department, and then Lilium Escalera is going to come up and give a brief overview of some of the freight projects that we have in Hillsborough County. So the backbone of our freight program is our Tampa Bay Regional Strategic Freight Plan. We completed that in 2012 with collaboration from the MPOs, cities and municipalities in the region, plus Polk, Manatee, and Sarasota, because they have a significant impact on the freight movement in Tampa Bay. Right now, we're going through a process to refresh that plan to reflect some of the new plans that have been created by others, like the FLZ strategic plan that you guys just adopted, as well as Port Tampa Bay's master plan. We're also reflecting some of the growth in air cargo at Tampa International Airport and some of the developments of new distribution centers on County Line Road in eastern Hillsborough County, as well as down in South County. If you'd like to look at it a little more in depth, you can go to tampabayfreight.com and it's all up there. Another thing that is on tampabayfreight.com is our comprehensive freight improvement database. This is where we go out and we talk to commercial vehicle operators and find out what are the operational issues they have on the roadway. So recently we completed surveys with every truck driver coming into Hooker's Point at Port Tampa Bay, as well as the Publix Distribution Center on County Line Road. And we've done 700 outreach opportunities for commercial vehicle operators. Now, when we do that, we take their information right then, or we give them the little business card that's on the bottom there. It's got my contact information, as well as a website that they can go online and let us know what those issues are. On the right is a visual representation of all the known freight operational issues that we have in Hillsborough County. And we're going to start addressing those through a first of its kind in the state program where we have a freight design, push button design build. So we can go out and quickly address some of these minor issues that may not be large enough to have a standalone resurfacing or reconstruction project. So like turn radiuses, extending a queue length, doing some access improvements, and little things like that. At the federal level, they developed the National Highway Freight Network. And so the orange roads on this map are the primary highway freight system. Those were determined by FHWA. The red ones are our intermodal connectors, and the two that we have in Hillsborough County, one goes to Hooker's Point from I-4, and the other one goes to the CSX intermodal yard just north of State Road 60. And the blue one is the critical urban freight corridor, which this board passed a resolution supporting, and that got added to the National Highway Freight Network. And that really has opened up some opportunities for us to go after some freight funding for specific freight projects. Now, the National Highway Freight Network is a program that gives federal dollars to the state. We get about 50 to 55 million on an annual basis. And how we develop those projects is all the freight coordinators across the state get together, we put together our project list, and then that goes to the Florida Freight Advisory Committee. We have Eric Lindstrom from Hillsborough County Economic Development, who is on that. He was selected for his expertise in site selection, and he is the only economic development representative on that committee. And so we submitted some projects, and 3 of them were selected. The first one is the I-75 southbound Hillsborough rest area reconstruction and expansion. That is going to reconstruct that rest area and add truck parking spots, so we'll have about 60 to 65 truck parking spots there. We were also selected to get the northbound rest area, but we were able to fund that through another mechanism in an earlier fiscal year. We also got the I-75 northbound on-ramp, which will add a second lane northbound from US 301 to I-75, which will eliminate a minor freight bottleneck in that area. And then the big one is US 41 at CSX, the Rockport yard that's south of Causeway Boulevard. Because of this program and the inclusion of that facility as a critical urban freight corridor, we were able to get some funding for that and fully fund that project. And Lillian was going to give some information on.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk to you about two of the projects that are going around US 41 on the port area. The first one, if you see at the map in the top, it's the Causeway, US 41 Causeway at CSX Railroad Crossing. And the other one at the bottom is US 41 at the Pendola Point. That's on the port entrance. Some key items of these two projects is the public outreach. We recognize the location and we recognize it's highly used. We have a lot of local businesses. We have HART involved, Hillsborough County, MPO, CSX. We got City of Tampa and the port itself. First one, it's US 41 at CSX. The work program number is 440749-1. And what we're going to do is reevaluation. We're going to look over the recommendations of that study that was approved back in 1994. Some of the key items there, the study recommended to add capacity and improve the operation at the two intersections there. One would be the CSX crossing at grade right now, and then the Causeway intersection. Due to the complexity of the CSX railroad, we're planning on grade separating that one because it's so close and the complexity of it is also recommending an overpass, creating an interchange there at Causeway. Funding, the PDN is to start in May of this year. The design following on 2020. Something interesting about these, we're going to have the same consultant doing the PDN and the design, and that create the opportunity to obviously reduce the time that it takes to go from one to the other. So we have one consultant doing it both. And the right-of-way is scheduled for 2022 with construction scheduled for 2026. The other project, it's south of it, close to the port intersection for 30056-1. This PD&E is already completed, so we worked with the MPO and we were able to schedule it to have design starting on 2023. One of the recommendations from this PD&E is to improve the safety and the operational near that intersection. We recognize it's highly used by trucks going port to port. So it also includes the widening, extending that 6-lane. If you're familiar with that area, you know on Causeway, we have a 6-lane facility, but then when you go to Denver, it drops to a 4-lane. So this operational project will extend that half a mile of the 6-lane, so both projects work together. We also recognize the need for bike lanes and sidewalk pedestrian improvements that needed at that intersection. The last slide that I have is kind of like a simulation of what that PD&E it's intended to recommend there. You can see there are areas right now that are missing sidewalks. There are sidewalks gaps between. There's also bike lanes, keyhole missing, and some of the legs there. So what this project will do is enhance that, extending bike lanes, adding sidewalks, increasing the crossing, making those crosswalks wider, median refuge there, looking at the lighting, because we understand that there's a highly used by truck, but we also want to make sure that the pedestrians and bikers are there in a safer way. We will come, as I said before, the 41 and CSX project is to start in May of this year. So next year we will come back to you and show you the results and what the public outreach have been for that project. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner
Just
Merman.
a quick comment. Thank you. I got to tell you, the people in South County that travel down 41 every day to work, that the day that overpass opens on 41 will be a great day for South County because they won't get stopped by all those trains that go there. So I'm really pleased to see the progress. I know there's much more that can be done, but I think just having this vehicle now that we can use, the freight logistics zone, I think it really puts us in good position for federal and state funding. So I'm very happy about this. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Kemp.
I echo those comments. I think, honestly, the two biggest bottlenecks in the Tampa Bay region are coming across a bridge there at West Shore, coming east, where there's only 2 lanes, and this particular place with the CSX. We have not been able, we had to take buses off it. We can't use it for transit at 41. Has not been able to be used because of this particular reason. So I'd love to see that open as a transit way in the future, because I think that is the key place where it should be. And I'm anxious to see this get done. Any way it could ever be moved up would be great too.
Mr. Klug.
Yes. This is a significant project for the port, and it's up there with the I-4 connector. And if you look at the strategic plan we did for the Hillsborough Polk Freight Logistics Zone, we have over 9,000 truck moves a day from the port. A lot of that's coming from Hookers Point, going right onto I-4 connector, which takes those trucks out of downtown, out of Ybor City. But another big portion is going through this area. And this is an area where the CSX loop rail is, which is the largest CSX loop rail in the southeast. That loop rail was built there to take traffic out of downtown. That traffic used to go, unit trains used to go through downtown Tampa on Meridian to Seddon Island, which is now Harbor Island. We moved that over to Rockport back in 1967-70 period to get the train traffic out of downtown. Now this is the next step to this, is the final resolution, having that overpass, avoiding those delays. I know there's, like I said, 10 unit trains per day probably go across US 41 blocking traffic. This is a significant project for the port. I'd like to thank DOT, Brian especially, and also with Beth Alden's leadership, working with the Polk TPO to develop this freight logistics zone. I think we're the only one in the state, maybe next to Jacksonville perhaps, that actually identified a freight logistics zone to take care of issues like this, and also identified funding for projects like this. And so this is like prioritizing the funding. This is a major step forward for the port, and we thank you for your cooperation getting the funding for this.
Yes, Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. I guess I didn't finish my whole statement, so I'm glad you jumped in there because this is significant for the port. But I did want to ask you, you are planning, or you're doing PD&E work to widen 41 in some areas. Is that still on the horizon?
Like for this project in particular, if you see in the image, the Causeway project in that area, our focus would be the grade separation. There's like half a mile between Pendola and that Causeway project that will extend in that 6-lane. So both projects work together in the
Okay,
port
I
can-
think Ed he knows what I'm talking about.
The other PD&E is doing from County Line to connect to this.
Will that connect to this? Will that connect to this?
Yes, so we're doing a PD&E study from on 41. It starts in the county line that moves.
Oh, yeah, that's ongoing. Yeah, the PD&E there is ongoing.
Because going to Commissioner Kemp's, I mean, this makes transit on 41 much more realistic for the future. And so I'm very happy to see all that. If it all comes together, and I think that will be a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And just
Yes,
one
Commissioner
more
Kemp.
recognition for Ms. Alden, I think, for really moving this forward. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. You've been, and of course, FDOT, but I just like to.
They planned to see.
All right, thank you very much. So our final status report this morning, very interesting topic, 2045 growth, forecasts, and scenario planning.
Good morning. I'm Sean College with the Planning Commission staff. This is a joint project between the Planning Commission and the Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's done about every 5 years, and generally what this project will do will give us an idea of where in the county the tremendous amount of growth in population and employment that we expect is going to locate within the jurisdictions, within the unincorporated county, where it's going to go. And it should also give us an idea of how we might be able to accommodate that rapid growth that we're expected to experience through 2045. It's a very important project. It's used widely. That's why it's a joint project with the Planning Commission and the MPO. The MPO uses it to support their long-range transportation plan update. The Planning Commission uses it for land use recommendations, and local jurisdiction staff use it. The county staff, the city staff use it for helping to plan their infrastructure improvements they may need in the future. We also get inquiries from the private sector in terms of locating of businesses within the county. So it's a very important project. It's done every 5 years. We're going to give you an update. We do have a consultant who's engaged to do this project. I'll introduce him now. It's Kevin Tilbury of Cambridge Systematics, and he'll give you an update of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning. And I would agree this is a very interesting project. This is an opportunity for us to see what Hillsborough County will look like in 30 years. So it's a long-range study. As an MPO board, you guys aren't strangers to long-range plans. You develop, as Sean mentioned, you develop a long-range plan every 5 years. This is a little different, though, in that as a scenario planning exercise, it gives us an opportunity to look at things from a much more broad perspective. So not just transportation, but what things look like from housing standpoint, infrastructure, schools, all those types of things, because they're all interrelated. And to give you an example of how they're interrelated, here, let me just show you what we're talking about. This is starting from 1960. This is a decade by decade look at growth in Hillsborough County. This is what growth looked like in 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, and now in the present. So anything look funny there? Not a lot of vacant land, is there? Anyone take a guess how much developable land there is inside the urban service area now? It's about 35,000 acres, which sounds like a lot, 35,000 acres that we have to grow on. But when you look at it from this standpoint, today we've got about 2.1 million, when you combine population and jobs, we have about 2.1 million people in jobs in Hillsborough County. And that translates into about 6.5 people in jobs for every acre of developed land. So that includes the lot that your house is on, the office that we're sitting on right now, the schools, everything. So about 6.5 people in jobs per acre. So by the year 2045, we expect about another 1.2 million people in jobs. That's what the projections say. So if we look at it from the standpoint of that 6.5 people in jobs per acre, that translates into about 150,000 acres of land that are going to be needed. So if you bookmark that last slide that I just showed you, that, there's an incongruency there. We've got about 35,000 within the urban services area, and we need 150,000 at our current rate. That's a huge red flag. That means that we don't have enough vacant land to accommodate the amount of growth that's being projected if we continue to develop as we have developed in the past. So do you think when we hit the 35,000 that we'll just stop growing and people will stop coming here and jobs will stop moving? No, probably not. The market's going to respond. So that's going to happen in a number of ways. We're going to start to see more pressure to expand the urban services area. We'll start to see more redevelopment, and we'll start to see more emphasis on infill and re-intensification. And these will all be market-generated forces because of that. So we're already kind of starting to look at things from that standpoint. I think many of you are familiar with the study that the Urban Land Institute undertook on the I-4 corridor that was presented last month. So we're doing something similar, but on a county-wide scale. So we're looking big picture in the year 2045, the county as a whole. Now, we're also looking at it from a little bit of a different perspective. We're using scenario planning. So what I basically just showed you was the trend. So if we continue on our current path, that's what it's going to get us. We're going to run out of land. So what happens then? Scenario planning gives us the opportunity to look at some alternative futures for the county. If we vary our transportation investments, if we vary how we locate growth, all those types of things, what kind of impact will that have on our future? And that's exactly what this project is looking into. Now, we're not strangers to this. We did a similar exercise 5 years ago, coordinated with the Long Range Transportation Plan. It was called Imagine 2040, and we looked at 3 different scenarios. So we're going to do something similar, but the lay of the land is different now. We were coming out of the recession at that point. The prospects for growth were different. The prospects now are significantly higher, so that's one of the things that we have to contend with. The other thing is that we heard Ray's presentation earlier about this need for regional coordination. So we're starting to look at things more from a regional standpoint. So this plan is being closely coordinated with plans at the MPOs in Pinellas and Pasco as well. So it's going to be a truly regionally coordinated effort. So we'll look at regional scenarios. We've already started to think about what those scenarios might look like, and in future presentations, we'll be able to give you more information. We talked about the trend. We'll look at what's called a belt and boulevard that looks at sort of reconfiguring our transportation network and what that might bring. And then also we'll look at one that might signal a greater shift towards transit. And these scenarios already have sort of precedents in some current ongoing studies. So the TOD scenario, for example, would pivot off of the regional transit feasibility plan that's currently ongoing, and that would also coordinate closely with Tampa Bay Next, which is FDOT's new initiative looking at transportation investments in the region. So those are what our scenarios will look like. So we'll develop, we've got the trend and we'll develop some alternatives, but what will that tell us? So each person has a different hot button issue. Some things matter to people more than others. This board is obviously very interested in transportation. Other folks might be more interested in the environment. This is a comprehensive study, so we're going to try and present it from a number of different perspectives. We just talked about the fact that we can't accommodate all the people and jobs under our current trend. So if we were to mix things up in different scenarios, how many people and jobs could we accommodate? That's one of the central issues of this study. So our scenarios will be able to tell us that. Can we create a better future for accommodating people and jobs? Transit is certainly at the forefront of discussion now. So one of the important questions that the study will help answer is, will transit work in Hillsborough County? So if we were to reorganize growth around some very focused transit investments, what would that mean for our future? Would it work? Would enough people be able to use it? We know that walking and cycling can continue to be important to people. So in order for walking and cycling to work, you have to have origins and destinations right close enough to each other so you actually can walk. So our scenarios will be able to give you insight into that. Is walking and cycling possible in the future? Are we creating that environment? Now, one option might be we just worry about accommodating employment and let Pasco County absorb all the the homes and the population, and we focus more on jobs. Well, there are a couple of issues with that. One, have you ever heard of Silicon Valley? That's the issue that they're dealing with now, where you have they have explosive job growth, but they can't afford the housing, and people are living in their cars to be able to teach school there. So that's a big issue. The other is that's a huge transportation issue then, because then everyone is coming in from other counties to go to work every day. So scenarios will give us insight in, can we create a better transportation future from a commuting standpoint as well. So our scenarios will be able to tell us that. We talked about expanding the urban services area. It's more than just redrawing a line on the map. That has cost implications as well in terms of pipes in the ground, streets on the road, all those types of things. We met someone from the school board yesterday. How we build stuff will have impacts on schools as well. So the scenarios will give us insight into differences in cost between different development patterns as well. Obviously, storm vulnerability is a big issue. So how many people will we put at risk under different development scenarios from a sea level rise and from a significant weather event standpoint? We'll be able to provide insight into that. And Hillsborough County is fast growing, but we still have a lot of valuable agricultural and natural resources that we want to preserve. So if we expand our urban services area, how much of that good stuff are we going to be able to keep? How much of that will get encroached upon? So our scenarios will be able to tell us that as well. So a lot of interesting information hopefully will come out of the study. We're sort of at the front end right now. We've done our background research into the trends, and we're developing this trend scenario. And into the spring, we'll start to look at these alternative scenarios, and then we'll go into outreach over the summer. And then what we hope to do, we may not pick a specific scenario, but what we might do is combine things that we like about each scenario and come up with a hybrid. And that'll probably happen in the fall, which is our shared collective vision for how we would like to see the county develop. And from that, in 2019, we'll use that hybrid scenario as the basis for getting into the business of updating the long-range transportation plan. So that's sort of the process in a nutshell. So that's where we are right now. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have, and I'm sure we'll be back in the future with more updates as well.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Just a few comments. It's interesting as we look almost 30 years in the future, we're really going back 100 years. because we had a mass transit system in 1945. We had urban density. We had a vibrant downtown. Now that stuff is coming back after we've built the interstates and we've gone to that suburban sprawl and spreading out throughout the county. And it's interesting how it's full circle.
That's
You
right.
know, now we're going back to these practices that are over 100 years old, going, okay, how do we get the proper services or the transportation? How do we get people here? I mean, you said it. Are they all going to live in Pasco and commute, to where the jobs are at here? I mean, what is that going to do? Can our infrastructure maintain that? Can our roads handle that kind of capacity with the continued growth that we expect? So it's just interesting to see how we move forward and we fix a lot of what we broke, through urban renewal, through the interstate, through a lot of things. So just an interesting presentation.
Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. I thought it was really interesting, too, particularly to hear that 6.5 people per acre is, I guess, what we accommodate here now. And I just wondered about, the Tampa Bay partnership did their regional competitiveness study and identified 20 areas, and I wonder how they compare with this kind of 6.5 number, because I bet it's very different. And I just wondered about kind of how the coordination will be in looking at that. And then the ULI just gave us this study where they recommended that we do more intense development in 3 different areas. And how does this work in coordination with those 2 findings, or what those are, those studies or those results are looking at?
Well, you're right. So the ULI study did look at more intensification, and I'll tell you that our scenarios too. We are seeing a trend now towards more intensification in terms of our densities and how we're building things. And that's just a function of the market. And under our scenarios, we will look at even more increased density and intensity, and we'll borrow, I think, some from what the ULI study has already done, but apply that on a countywide basis.
I just get concerned sometimes because it seems like I think this is really wonderful. The ULI, what they put out, I think, was just very, I would like to see that. I'd like to try to look at it more, but I'd like to have it guide us in the future. And then the Tampa Bay Partnership, they kind of identified these areas where we are just really, out of the 20 areas that we consider economic competitors, we're last in many, many of the categories, including transit, although not in congestion, where we're number 3. We have the easiest roads of the 20, or number 3 to ride on. But sometimes all these, resources and information, everything's out there, and I just like to think that it's, or where it gets coordinated and gets all integrated. So I guess that's just something I see. I get all this great information and how it comes together.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to hearing from you again. All right, Executive Director's report, Ms. Alden.
Thank you, sir. And we would like to bring together the 3 boards that are staffed by Plan Hillsborough for a strategic planning retreat this spring. It will help us to shape priorities for our long-range planning and carry out those priorities in a coordinated way among transportation. Worcester County is looking again potentially at the comprehensive plan update. The Hillsborough River Board is looking at strategic priorities. So we would like to invite you to participate in a half-day workshop, and we're tentatively scheduling that at this point for the 30th of March, which is a Friday. In the morning, and so we'll get more information out to you about that. Our next big event is going to be our Regional Safe Streets Summit, which we have been organizing with our partners, the other MPOs in the region, as a follow-up to our Vision Zero action plan. I'd like to invite everybody to participate in that on Tuesday, the 27th of February. There is a $60 registration fee that covers some basic meeting expenses. And we have some great speakers coming to that event. So just encourage everybody to come to our website, and board members, if you'd like us to register you, would be happy to do that. Our next MPO board meeting is Tuesday, the 6th of February, and our Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group is going to be next week, Friday, January 19th. That is going to be a longer meeting, and so if you'd like to reserve a box lunch, please let me know. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other business to come before the board this morning? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
With the state's warm temperatures and abundant sunshine, Florida's climate supports over 2,800 native plant species. But the same subtropical climate that supports native flora also makes it possible for non-native plants to thrive.